go live. Great. Hello, everyone at home. Welcome back to Wednesday evenings from Cambridge University Astronomy. You're joining us for our first Wednesday of 2021. And rather auspiciously, we are clouded out, so we have no stargazing for you this week, unfortunately. But we're very lucky that we're going to make up for it by having an excellent talk and a very thematically appropriate talk for this time of year. So I'm joined by Dr. Nicole Pawellek, and she is going to be telling us all about the astronomy behind the Star of Bethlehem. So when you're ready, over to you, Nicole.
Yep, thank you for the nice introduction. So my name is Nicole, and today's topic is the Star of Bethlehem, which is a quite fitting topic for today's date, because we are not only celebrating not only celebrating the birthday of Sherlock Holmes today, but we are also celebrating, or Christians all over the world are celebrating, the Feast of Epiphany. And one of the traditions of the Feast of Epiphany is the blessing of houses, where people write with chalk the letters C and B in between the numbers of the current year. But what does CMB mean? So for astronomers, usually CMB means something like cosmic microwave background, but for Christians, it means something completely different, I can tell you. But I will go into detail in a minute. So at first we have to ask ourselves, so what do Christians celebrate on Epiphany? And what does this have to do with the Star of Bethlehem? So for that, we have to look at the Christmas story. So we are still in Christmas time. If you are a Christian, you probably still have your Christmas tree. And the Christmas story starts like many other stories with the idea of a great politician who wanted to know how many people lived in his country. And Joseph and Mary had to travel to Bethlehem to get counted. And at that time, Mary was highly pregnant. And since many other people had to travel to Bethlehem to get counted as well, there were no accommodations available. So finally, they had to sleep in a barn. And Mary, late that night, gave birth to baby Jesus. In the meantime, and this is the main part of this talk, a mysterious star appeared over Bethlehem, which led the wise men from the east, or the so-called Magi, to baby Jesus, and so that they could visit him. So now, when did all this happen? So how long ago did the Christmas story happen? And to get an idea of that, let's have a look at this time scale. On the left side, we see the letters BC, which means before Christ. And on the right side, we see the letters AC, so after Christ. And since a short number of days, or a small number of days, we are in the year 2021. So we are on the far right side of this time scale. And the Christmas story actually happened, or is thought to have happened in the year 1 before Christ. So there are more than 2,000 years in between, and this is a very long time scale. So many things happened. For example, in December last year, we celebrated the 250th birthday of Ludwig van Beethoven. And despite his high age of 250 years, he's still very close to the right side of our time scale. Traveling back further in time, so we get to other composers, for example, like Johann Sebastian Bach, or more for our British audience, so going back further in time, so around the 1500s, there you come to the most famous king, Henry VIII, so that's the one with the 6 wives. So and if we go even further in time, then we are in the era of knights, very common in Europe at that time. So and then going to the years between 600 and 800, we come to the time where Vikings were invading the British Islands. But still, so now we are getting closer to the era of the birth of Jesus, but we are still in the years 600 and 800. So, and what I can tell you, 2 famous guys known from the time of Jesus' birth are actually those 2. So that you get an idea of how much time lies between the birth of Jesus and us. So it's a very, let's say, not very detailed history we know of that time. So we are interested in this small era here, the years around 1 before Christ. So, and to get an idea of or information on the Christmas story, what we have to do is, of course, literature research. And the best source of information on the Christmas story is, of course, the Bible. So, and now let's have a look at the wise men from the East. What does the Bible say about them? So at first, usually people assume there were 3 wise men of the East. So, and coming back to the letters C and B, this could mean that they were the starting letters or the capital letters of their names. So like Caspar, Melchior, Balthasar. But actually, the Bible doesn't say anything about how many wise men there were. There could even have been wise women. So let's call them just wise people. And the Bible says, for example, in the book of Matthew, so the Gospel of Matthew, we saw Christ's star when it rose. Now we have come to worship him. So hopefully they mean Christ and not the star. But going further in the text, then Herod secretly called for the wise men. He found out from them exactly when the star had appeared. So this means that the wise men, while they were led to the baby Jesus, King Herod didn't even recognize that there was a star leading wise men from the east. And coming closer to the end of the chapter 2 of Matthew, there's written, the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them. So that's quite strange for a star to move across the sky while they walk at night. And it finally stopped over the place where the child was. So this is Bethlehem. And going to texts which are not written in the Bible, so it's so-called the book of James, we saw a very great star shining among those stars and dimming them so that the stars appeared not. So basically meaning the star the Magi were following was much brighter than all the other stars, which is strange as well since Herod didn't recognize the star at all. Okay, so what could this star have been? So since it's quite strange, and the first idea is, okay, it could have been a miracle. And there I have to say, there are no scientific explanations for miracles, but what I can say for miracles is they happen every day, and every person who has to write computer codes knows that miraculously, sometimes a code is working or even not. So it's still a possibility that this Star of Bethlehem was a miracle. Second aspect, the star could have been a myth. So, and what do I mean by that? So let's have a look again at our timescale. But now we do not only look at the short or the couple of years, but around the birth of Jesus. But let's take a larger picture out of it. So in the year 1 before Christ, Jesus was born. And in the year 90 after Christ, or in the years around, the Gospel of Matthew was written. And even later, the book of James was written. So this means that there are nearly 100 years between the actual story of Christmas, so the birth of Jesus, and the writing down of the story. And every person who ever had to take history exams knows that it is quite difficult to remember all the facts correctly when you have not been present at the actual thing happening. So that's one aspect. So it might have been just a mess up of things. Or what this Matthew could have done is that the star was only included to fulfill a prophecy. So what I mean by that is that there were many prophecies of the coming of Christ. So for example, in the Old Testament, so the book of Numbers, there is written, a star will come from among the people of Jacob. A king will rise up out of Israel. So and this could mean, so and this was made. This prophecy was made in the years 400 before Christ. So there are 400 years between the birth and the prophecy, and then again 100 years between the Christmas story and the actual writing down. So, and this means that, for example, Matthew could have written down the Christmas story and then use this star to underline that this baby Jesus is this new king rising up out of Israel. Speaking for that, or an argument for that, is that this star is only mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew. There is no other text part in the Bible saying something about the Star of Bethlehem. And This could be caused by the Roman Empire, because everything that had to do with astrology or with, let's say, interpretation of stellar positions or something like that, this was completely forbidden in the kingdom. So, and this means that every person who wrote something like horoscopes or about stars on the sky influencing politics was put into prison. So, and therefore, it might be a true option or a real option for Matthew to just using it as a kind of metaphor to say, okay, this is the star, this is baby Jesus, and there was this star, but it's nothing which actually happened. Okay, so it's possible that this star was, besides being a miracle, it could have been also a myth. So now coming to more astronomical things. So it could have been something that happened on the sky in a nearly contemporary, so probably perhaps only months or days before the actual birth of Jesus. But to investigate now what is possible or what could have happened, now we have at first to have a look at the Roman calendar, because we have to make sure when was Jesus born. So, and the first naive idea is, okay, we celebrated Christmas on the 25th of December, and we have the year 2021 after Christ. So it could have been 25th of December in the year 1 before Christ. But I can tell you it's not that easy, and you will see why. So let's go to the Romans, and the Romans had a quite nice calendar actually. So they started with the foundation of Rome and then just counted years forward. And they had a pretty good feeling for the duration of 1 year. So, but this would have been much too easy, obviously, because if everything was written down like, okay, in the calendar, foundation of Rome, we know exactly the date of the foundation of Rome. Everything would be clear what was written in the Roman literature. But as is the problem with some sovereigns, each sovereign gets their own calendar system. This is quite, confusing, for example. Let's take this one. So as Julius Caesar is reigning the Roman Empire, so for example, he starts his reign at a certain date, and then his calendar is starting at this certain date, and then you are, for example, in the year Caesar 12. So putting or using a more modern example for that, for the poor British people, you would be in the year Boris II nowadays. So, and for the German friends, we are in the year Angela 16, something like that. So, but as I can say, it's very confusing, and not every region had the same sovereign or the same calendar system. So, and obviously the historians writing the texts had to use the calendar of their sovereign, of the local sovereign there. So it's quite a mess up. So we have to ask ourselves, who was ruling at the time of Jesus' birth? And again, literature research is our solution. And we find it's Emperor Augustus. And then reading further, we find out Jesus was born in the year Augustus 28. And what I can tell you now is the next question. I can imagine everybody out there is now asking themselves, when the hell was the year Augustus 28? And I will help you with that. It's not easy. Let's start with the Roman calendar again. So here we are in the years 723 from the foundation of the city of Rome, and here we have the calendar of Augustus. So when did his calendar system start? And there we have two possibilities. For example, in the year 723. So this is connected with these two people. So this is Cleopatra and Antony. So they were, giving us the first soap opera in history. So, and both of them were defeated in the Battle of Actium by Emperor Augustus. At that time, he was still using his, let's say, maiden name of Octavius. Okay, but the next point, or the other possibility is that 4 years later, in the year 727, Octavius called himself Augustus and became the first emperor of the Roman Empire. So, okay, we have now both years, so 723 and 27 as possibility. And looking at historic texts or historical texts from other Roman historians, we see, okay, the year 723 is the actual starting date of Augustus calendar, and the other one is wrong. But I think you already feel that our calendar obviously begins at the wrong date. Great, yeah. And who was responsible for that? It was a monk living in the 5th century after Christ. His name was Dennis the Little, and he introduced our calendar, which we still use nowadays. So this BC-AC system is based on his work. So he said Jesus was born in the year 1 before Christ. If we correct it to the actual date of the start of the Augustus calendar, we get the year 4 before Christ. But other historical texts say something like Herod dies after lunar eclipse in March 4 before Christ. So this is quite a secure date. And what we know from the Bible is that Herod was still ruling when Jesus was born. So this means Jesus' birth was probably in the year 5 before Christ. But we don't really know. Okay, so now we can constrain the time frame we have to investigate for typical astronomical effects. But what do we know about the star? So what criteria or what properties does the star have? For example, it was first seen in the east. Okay, and the Magi say it went before them and stood over Bethlehem. And Bethlehem is 8 kilometers to the south of Jerusalem. So it has to be an astronomical event which was visible over Jerusalem. So we have a direction and location. Then not all people recognize this star. So for example, Herod, he was asking the wise men about this star. And this star might have been brighter than all the other stars on the sky, which is a bit difficult to agree with points 3 and 4, but let's see how far we get. Okay, what are typical astronomical phenomena we can investigate? So in there, I used a nice simulator. Here, we can see the night sky over Jerusalem in the year 5 before Christ. So, and in the middle, here we see these cloudy structures. So this is actually our Milky Way. So this here is our moon, and there are some other stars we can see at night. We can also see planets. They are just not visible because I chose probably at the wrong nighttime. And we see here these greenish, bluish texts here. So these are so-called meteor showers, which I will explain later. So, and for those of you who are more into stellar constellations, you get something like, Sagittarius here and Capricorn here. Or some more from the southern night sky, there are constellations called the microscope, for example. Okay, so as I said, we can observe planets as well. So what planets can we observe in the solar system? So, and there we have our sun in the center. Then, of course, we are living on the planet Earth. And next to Earth, we have our moon. And in the center, so we have Mercury and Venus, which are visible with the naked eye. And of course, the planet Mars next to Earth. So if we go further out, we can even see the largest planet of our solar system. So this is Jupiter. And in between Mars and Jupiter, there's something very important in connection with the meteor showers I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. So there we have our so-called asteroid belt, which is filled with asteroids and comets, so giant rocks, which are important to produce the so-called meteor showers. And we have another planet with rings, so Saturn is also visible. So all the other planets in our solar system were not visible at that time. So Mercury and Uranus were discovered much later. Okay, so now we know about the planets possible to observe, which were possible to observe. Now let's make a little bit more system behind that. So astronomical phenomena, so we have two types. So one type is the predictable phenomena. So for example, the rising and setting of stars. So we can calculate that and can say, okay, which star is appearing when. And we also can do that with the position of planets. But there is a much higher number of phenomena which are not predictable, so unpredictable ones. For example, the appearance of comets, or the appearance of meteor showers, or supernovae. So what does such an astronomical phenomenon have to fulfill? So the first point is many prophecies of the coming of Christ were made, and many of them were made even 1,000 years before Jesus' birth. So this means we're looking for a rare astronomical event. So just imagine if it was something like the full moon, and then every month some person was shouting Christ is coming. So, and this 12 times a year, so that's difficult. So we are looking for something rare. So one possibility is comet. So in a comet, for example, visible here. So this is the comet Neowise, which was observable last year in September. So, or if you want something more spectacular, this is the comet McNaught from the year 2007. And there you see here the bright spot of the comet and its huge tail visible over a huge area of the night sky. And also the comet McNaught was visible during daylight, as can be seen here in this picture. And the first question is, what is a comet? And easily speaking, a comet is nothing else than a dirty snowball. So what is happening with such a dirty snowball is when it's coming closer to the sun, it's getting warmer, and then the ice of the comet is vaporized, so it's becoming gas. And when the ice is becoming gas, the dust is getting loose and then released into a dust tail. So and therefore we always see two tails of a comet on a night sky when it's there and close to the sun. So we see a dust tail, so of the dirt of the comet, and we see a gas tail. Okay, and one famous candidate of a comet is the comet named Halley. So after the person who predicted its position for the first time, but this was very difficult. So why is it difficult? You can see here on the right side of the picture where we have these circles. So in the center we have our sun, and the circles here show the orbits of our planets around the sun. As I said, they are nearly circular, but this gray line here, this is the actual orbit of the comet. And as you can see as well, is there's only a short amount of time where this comet is close to the sun. And only when it is close to the sun, we can see the tails, because only then it's hot and the gas is produced. So only then the ice is vaporized. So most of the time, this dirty snowball is frozen and in the dark. So, and I can imagine that nobody of you ever had a snowball fight during darkness, because yeah, you can't see anything. Okay, so on the night sky, a comet like Halley would look like this. So it's becoming darker, and then the tail becomes visible. Yeah, and now I tell you what, here, this is Halley in the night sky or over Jerusalem in the year 11 before Christ. So Halley was visible over Jerusalem in the year 11 before Christ, and you could perhaps interpret its tail as pointing to Bethlehem, for example. And as I said, we don't really know in which year Jesus was born, so perhaps it was even before 5 before Christ. But this comet Halley is one possibility for the actual star of Bethlehem. Okay, so comets are possible. Next point, meteor showers, which I mentioned 2 times already. And they are produced by the asteroids in the asteroid belt. And what do asteroids do? Of course, they collide and produce a lot of dust and dirt and little small rocks. And these little small rocks and dust, they collide with our atmosphere. So the thing we breathe in to get air into our lungs. So it's basically, yeah, so the air and nitrogen and stuff like that. And then the dust and the small rocks get heated up when they collide with the Earth's atmosphere. And when they are heated up, then we see these bright tails, which are quite beautiful in the night sky. And this is what we call meteor. And if there are a lot of them, so then we can call it a meteor shower. And since we do not know when such asteroid is colliding or producing a lot of dust so that we get a meteor shower, so it's unpredictable in that case. So some are known, but it's not predictable as such. Okay, so meteors are possible and comets are possible. So the last unpredictable I named here is the so-called supernova. And a supernova is when a star is dying. So, and a star is doing that by exploding and producing a lot of light. So supernova is very bright. So the death of a star is always a great happening in the night sky. So here you see the supernova 1994D in front of a galaxy. And a galaxy is made up of billions of stars. And this supernova is only the death of one star. So you see, it's a very bright thing to happen in the night sky. So some example, simulating it again, for example, is here the supernova 1604. It's a so-called Kepler supernova because Johannes Kepler was discovering it. And in comparison to the planet Jupiter, which is, as I said, our biggest planet in the solar system. So getting a bit more detail here. So here we see the planets Mars, Jupiter, and then next to it, the supernova 1604, which is also observable during daytime. So it is brighter than other stars in the sky. And as I said, we can't predict that. So stars are very, let's say, private things. So they don't tell us when they decide to die. So it's just happening. And the supernova is only visible for a couple of days or weeks. So therefore, if there are no historical texts from that time observing a new star, something like that, then, and since it was forbidden in the Roman Empire, it's still possible that there was a supernova happening at that time. Okay, so I showed that unpredictable things like comets, meteor showers, and supernova are always possible to explain the Star of Bethlehem. So let's come to more the predictable side, so the setting and rising of stars and position of planets. And many people interpreted, for example, the position of stars or planets in an astrological kind of way. So coming back to the picture I showed you a minute ago, so here we see the supernova again and Jupiter and Mars, but now we are not focusing on the supernova, but on the planets. And what we see is that the planets Mars and Jupiter are parallel to the lines of our map from the night sky. So this is called so-called alignment. And in the year 5 before Christ, so February 5 before Christ, over Jerusalem, we see a similar alignment of Jupiter and Saturn, which could have been interpreted as a kind of pointing to Bethlehem and leading the Magi or the wise men to Bethlehem. So even Mars was close to this alignment, but it didn't quite happen at that point. Another thing that is interesting, for example, is close proximity of Jupiter and Saturn, which was also observable last December, I think 21st of December, they were quite close. And then it looks for the naked eye, if you didn't have telescopes at that time. So then they were so close that it might have been interpreted as one giant light, so one giant star, instead of the two planets, Jupiter and Saturn. So and then even other constellations of the planets or stars might have been interpreted in an astrological kind of way. So here we see Mercury, Venus, and Saturn visible at the same time, or here Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, and Mars. So they are not in special alignment, but they are all visible at that time. Or here we have an actual alignment. So Venus, Jupiter, and Mars, and Mercury a bit to the right. Or even here, we have a kind of, let's say, a cuddle between a Jupiter, Venus, and Moon. So I like these images quite a lot. So, but as I said, we can't constrain it at that point whether this was interpreted as something special at that time. So let's summarize it a bit. So what was the Star of Bethlehem? So it could have been a miracle. As I said, I don't have any arguments for or against it. It could have been a myth because, a lot of time was in between the actual happening and the writing down. It could have been a nearly contemporary astronomical event. So comets are possible, meteor showers and supernovae are all possible things. And it could also have been a kind of alignment or a close proximity of Jupiter and Saturn. So yeah, great. I gave you 4 possibilities, and all possibilities, are still possible after investigating them closer. Problem is, we need more data, and having more data, is not quite possible since our only source of information is the Bible, and the Bible is not a scientific book for us to investigate. But finally, saying about the star of Bethlehem, its message is quite clear. So Christians all over the world use it to celebrate the birth of their Messiah, and distributing the good news of the coming of Christ. So, and finally, since we are back to square one since this week, we are back in lockdown, and all astronomers are doing it similar to Sherlock here, so working with laptops on their couch table. But let's have a look on the bright side of life. So it could have been much worse in 2020, and the vaccines are coming. And with that, I close my talk and hope for some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nicole. A lovely positive note to end on. We do have some questions coming through on YouTube. For anyone that hasn't asked a question yet and still wants to, you can stick your question in the YouTube chat. I'll kick off with this question from Shabam, who wants to know, can you talk a bit about the astronomical significance? Excuse me, I've got hiccups. Can you talk a bit about the astronomical significance of Stonehenge?
There I'm probably not the right person to talk to, but what I can tell you about Stonehenge is that it's oriented in the way that they were celebrating their, let's say, the ancient feasts of, how is it called? Winter equinox, is that the right word? So when day and nighttime were the same. So we have that 2 times a year. So one in September. No, that's wrong. In summer, when we have the longest days, and we have the shortest days in December, and then of course, and then we have the times in September when is equinox of night and day, so the equal length of night and day, and I think that was celebrated by the ancient people living in that close area, but I don't have any details for that.
Okay, and another question also from Shabam, who wants to know about comets. They're wondering, why do comets have 2 different tails?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Point is, dust particles, so the small bodies which are situated in this huge ice body, are much bigger than when the ice becomes vaporized. So the vaporized ice particles, so the gas, is much smaller than the big dust particles. And because of that, the sun, the radiation from the sun, has much more influence on the gas particles, the much smaller ones, and they are pushed into a different direction than the actual big dust particles, which are basically not interested in the, let's say, the stellar radiation at all. So they are released, and they feel a kind of, let's say, headwind, and because of that, they are more in the direction of moving of the comet, but the gas is actually pushed away from the star due to this radiation pressure, let's say. So the star pushes, the light of the star pushes, or the stellar wind pushes the small gas particles away.
Great. So quick question from Julia, following up on something that you talked about. Are meteor showers predictable?
Yeah, so that the point is, nowadays we know of meteor showers happening. As I showed you, we simulated the night sky with this nice stellarium program. So there you see that there are things we know of. But if there was a meteor shower suddenly happening, so the problem is that the particles or the hitting the atmosphere are not predictable when they hit the atmosphere. So it can happen quite suddenly. So we know of things, they are there, and then we know, okay, now those particles happen, but as astronomers do nowadays, they wait for a meteor to happen. So we can't predict when it's actually happening. So we know something is there, but we don't know when. That's the problem.
Wonderful, thank you. And a question from Julian, which is going to be the last question, unless someone sneaks in at the last minute. So a question, you can still ask one. So last one that I've got in front of me from Julian. Assuming that the story about the visit of the Magi is true, how would the Magi know that the star was over the home of Mary and Joseph?
That's another excellent question, which I can't answer because I was asking that myself. Probably, I mean, it's a thing that at that time you didn't Google, or you didn't use Google Maps to find your location quite exactly. So what they probably did is something like, is there a pregnant woman? So they were asking around, I can assume, so that they say it was over the town of Bethlehem, and then the actual, let's say, fine tuning of the location was done by using your common sense and asking people. So we are looking for a pregnant woman.
Yeah, makes sense. Questions are flooding in, which I like to see. A question from Paul, who wants to know what astronomical highlight of 2021 are you looking forward to?
Is that a personal opinion from myself asked there? So
Sure, yeah. Personally, I mean, I can say from my point of view, the astronomical highlight of 2020, which I was looking forward to, was the conjunction that was clouded out.
Yeah, I mean, what I did was doing a little bit of astrophotography of this conjunction before it actually happened. So because it was completely clouded out, but I mean, the comet is quite spectacular, and it was let's say the first comet I observed as an astrophysicist from a expert point of view, and because of that, so I was looking forward to that.
Okay, we have a question from a different Paul, which I will say you're free not to answer if this if this is controversial. He asks, what are your thoughts that Matthew embellished the story of the star to try and bring a bit of showbiz to the story?
Oh, okay. I mean, it's a possibility, and that's the nice thing of the Star of Bethlehem. I had nice discussions with different Christians and experts in that field. We can't say anything against or for it. So you can interpret it as you like. And if you like the idea of embellishment of a star to make it more showbiz-like, and that's our star, then that's your right. And that's completely fine because we don't have evidence against that. For me, it's a point of, it's still a mystery we can solve. But the point, or the main point, is that it doesn't really matter because probably Jesus was born anyway. So it doesn't matter whether there was a star or not. So for people who believe in Christianity or in Jesus and the good news Jesus was bringing to earth, it doesn't matter whether there was a star at all. So it's just Jesus was there. And therefore, I could say that the star is nice and a great mystery to solve, but it's not everything.
Okay, and a question come through from a username which I'm not going to try and pronounce. What is the degree of uncertainty in astronomical predictions over a period of 2,000 years?
Yeah, it's a big one. I'm not even going to give you an estimate of number because that it's probably even just an estimate on the error bars. So it's quite uncertain. I mean, we know of supernovae from 1,000 years ago from old Chinese books or something, but 2,000 years or works of 2,000 years are difficult to interpret. And I mean, measurements, you didn't have telescopes, you did it by eye and stuff like that. I mean, they could make great predictions on stellar positions and something like that. But going into detail over 2,000 years is probably error bars, huge error bars, probably larger than your actual diagram or value you're hoping to get out of it. So probably more than 100%.
Yeah, I always think about the precession of the equinoxes, right? The fact that the Earth is on this 26,000 year kind of wobble around its axis, and over 2,000 years, that's a significant amount of wobble, right? So everything shifts around, and we know how to account for this nowadays, but 2,000 years ago they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, there was, we have to keep in mind that our solar system, as we interpret it, so the model of the solar system with the sun in the center, was only used in the medieval, so around after the medieval, so in the 1600 whatever, and so those people lived with probably with the idea that they are in the center of the universe, and therefore their calculations might be completely different, and therefore could differ quite a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. People in the chat saying thank you for such a wonderful and thought-provoking talk. Certainly gave me a lot to think about. It's nice to have a kind of a themed around the year.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Nicole. Virtual round of applause for our speaker. Next week, we are back with a guest lecture from a best-selling science author, Mario Livio, who's going to be talking about Galileo and the science deniers. So more historical astronomy this time next week. We will see you then. Bye-bye. There we go.